is Rebecca, and I identify as queer and genderqueer. So if queer means sort of like encompassing of all sexualities, queering gender is sort of encompassing of all possible genders. It also means that I am living and behaving and presenting above or outside of the dichotomy of male and female, which I think is a false dichotomy. It didn't only start a few months ago. It started like my whole life ago. I have been identifying as a woman for most of the last 28 years, and it hasn't really felt right. I guess if I'm starting from like the actual moment where I was like, oh, here's this word that I can use, it would be when I watched a video that Ruby Rose produced and wrote and directed and starred in which she was transitioning from a conventionally very feminine presentation to a conventionally masculine presentation, and she like shaves her hair off and washes off makeup that's covering up her tattoos and all that stuff, and I was just like, I couldn't really put words to it other than like, I want to be able to do this. Like, I want to be able to move back and forth and have that flexibility. And I used to do that a little bit when I was in high school, probably more than a little bit. I dressed in drag and I cross-dressed and presented much more masculine, but I didn't really think about it too much. I kind of called myself a tomboy, and that wasn't exactly it, because I wasn't a girl who was boyish. It was more like I'm a person who is both masculine and feminine, and that's something I always acknowledged about myself, but didn't have the language to express at the time. But it was when I watched that video and it kind of hit me like, I need to shave off my hair, and I need to stop trying so hard to be feminine and to live up to a feminine ideal. I mean, it felt like I was just compromising a lot. I was trying to fit myself into like a womanhood that I just don't experience. Having the word genderqueer kind of come into the conversation about gender has been very helpful. So I'm an assistant editor at a women's lifestyle blog, and so you become sort of like hyper aware of gender roles existing in culture and how people are perceiving you and perceiving your gender, because you're exposed to this like constant conversation about gender, about womanhood, in terms of like sort of an abstract, outside of myself intellectual discussion about gender. Like, it's just constant. I think that I was very aware of the expectations that people had about how I'm supposed to act and be as a woman when I was identifying as a woman, and that was painful to me. Some of those things are painful anyway, because some of them are like very sex negative and very disrespectful of women's autonomy, like the expectation that you're supposed to be like sexually available to men who want you to be sexually available to them, but not to men who you want to be sexually available to. Does that make sense? Like, it's the like freak in the sheets and lady on the streets thing. Like, that's a painful expectation to have to live up to, regardless of what your gender identity is. It always felt like sort of particularly unfair for me, because it's just like, this isn't even who I am, and I don't want to care. I didn't want the rules to have to apply to me about women, you know. That sounds sort of narcissistic, or indulgent, but maybe that's okay. I've been uncrossing my legs more, sitting more square, taking up more space. I've been like learning which pomades I like, which is great. Wearing cologne more often, because I hated perfume before, but I love cologne, so I'm like, hooray, I get to do that now. I've been buying men's clothes and trying to find a good balance between clothes that are like meant to fit a female body and clothes that are meant to make me more masculine or look more masculine. There's been a conversation about how women should not be expected to act like men in order to be equals. I think that's absolutely true. I think that too, though, there are a lot of masculine behaviors that are really quite nice to engage in, like taking up more space. Like, I think that that's wonderful. It's just comfortable. It's like physically comfortable to do that, and to say no and have that just be the end of it, and not have to explain yourself and not feel obligated to explain yourself, which is something that I definitely experienced identifying as a woman. That's just, it simplifies things tremendously. But all these things I'm doing, not to like reject femininity and work toward presenting as a man, but to reject aspects of femininity that I don't enjoy and that have made me feel unhappy, and move toward the center. I came out as bisexual when I was 14. And at the time, it's kind of like how like I didn't have the language to call myself genderqueer until like recently. At the time, bisexual was the language that I had for what I understood about myself. So when I realized that I was bisexual, it was really just that I thought about it for a second. Am I attracted to women? And the answer was yes. And I was like, oh, okay, then I'm bisexual. Cool, whatever. So I identified that way for a long time. Then went through this terrible, abusive former relationship. And at first it was like, you can't be bisexual, you can't be attracted to women, you can't be attracted to anybody other than me. For a while, I was going around like, I'm only attracted to my husband, which was happening under the threat of violence and just constant, ongoing emotional manipulation. And as time went on in that relationship, I just started realizing like my identity was something that I sacrificed for it, and that's not acceptable. I wound up leaving for a lot of different reasons, obviously, but the main one was like, I can't be in this relationship and maintain my self-respect. And that's like the core reason that I left. So then when I left, I started identifying as bisexual again. I rejoined the LGBT community that had been very supportive of me as a teenager. And the more that I was around trans people, and the more that I really thought about trans identities, and the more I felt like bisexual is not a term that I'm comfortable with. It feels disingenuous, because if I believe that there's more than one sex and more than two sexes and more than two genders, then I can't say like bisexual, because bi means like both, and it implies that there's only two to choose from. And it's another situation where it's like, okay, think about it for a second. Am I attracted to trans people? Yes. Am I attracted to intersex people? Yes. Like, none of that feels like it would be like outside the realm of my sexual attraction or romantic attraction. So now I identify as queer. Identifying as genderqueer has been slightly different territory, because it does actually change the way that people relate to you. There's a question of like, am I my sister's sister? Or am I just their sibling? Am I my parents' child? Or am I their daughter? Am I an aunt? Am I a wife? Has been the hardest one to kind of navigate, because sexuality is defined by who you're attracted to. So if two people are in a relationship and they have pretty clear ideas about what their sexuality is, and then one of them says, hey, I think my gender identity is changing, then the other one's definition of what their sexuality is kind of has to change too. So when I talked to my husband about my gender identity the first time, he was perfect and wonderful as usual, and I told him, like, I think I want to start identifying as genderqueer. I explained to him, that means, like, I'm going to start presenting more androgynous. Sometimes I'm going to cross-dress. It's not cross-dressing if you're genderqueer, I guess, but it's like I'm going to start looking more masculine, working toward a more masculine physique, so that I'm more in the middle. And I told him, like, I don't want to have top or bottom surgery. This is not about changing my sex. It's just about, I don't want to identify as a woman anymore. And he said, I don't care as long as you still love me. And it was just like, oh my God, you're so perfect. It's absolutely like, if you're very in love with somebody and their gender changes, it's like, that's the response that hopefully you would give. I've been having some amount of insecurity about our relationship because I'm worried that him being attracted to me as a genderqueer person means that he's no longer heterosexual, and I don't know how he feels about that. But we had a conversation about it, and I told him, like, this might be something that you want to think about because it affects your identity. It affects the fact that, like, you're attracted to and in a partnership with somebody who's not a woman, and if you're a cis man, that means that you're not straight. And so he was just like, what am I then? And I was like, well, queer is the term that I use. When I came out on Facebook, I just did like a short little paragraph, like explaining I'm genderqueer, and like my family and friends have been supportive so far, but I just wanted to come out to everybody. And he posted a comment. He told me that he wanted to say, like, I'm gay for you, but that he was worried that my gay friends would take that as being dismissive in some way. And I was like, oh, that would have been perfect. It's like, that's so awesome. But no, he just put, like, I love, and then in caps, you. And that was pretty perfect too. But he's sort of embraced the idea that maybe he's queer, and his main thing is, like, he doesn't care that much, and he doesn't really care about labels that people put on themselves or labels that he needs to put on himself. He just wants to be nice and respectful and loving to people, and he wants people to be the same toward him, which is a great way of operating, I think. But he wants to be supportive of me, so he has continued to kind of queer himself a little, I guess, and that's been great. Cis and straight people are validated as normal from the very start. They don't have to worry about a threat of violence or being verbally attacked, being bullied, which is something that I think the erasure of, like, gay and trans identities and intersex people has done. Like, it makes you feel like you don't exist to be told that you have to change in order to be acceptable. Cis and straight people get to feel like they exist in the first place and they have a right to exist exactly as they are. And that's what I would want for everybody. Make me sound as smart as my book
Okay.
saying.
I have to make you. I should put duty head closer. Kind of